Now, violence and insecurity are surging across northern Nigeria with mass kidnappings, deadly attacks and rising threats to communities. Hundreds of school children remain missing after being abducted from school. Our reporter, Wandi Ntengento, has the story.
A surge in armed attacks, U.S. aid cuts and political instability in Nigeria is driving hunger to record levels. The UN World Food Programme says nearly 35 million Nigerians could go hungry in 2026 as it runs out of resources in December.
What we are looking at is 31 million people who are food insecure in Nigeria. And that's the highest absolute number of people food insecure in the world. When you're looking at acutely malnourished children, it's estimated to be around 15 million children. Here in the northeast of Nigeria, what we are looking at is roughly 1 million children who are severely, acutely malnourished this year. And hundreds of thousands of these children could potentially die if they do not get the assistance that they need.
As the UN warns of a famine ticking time bomb that could drive starving citizens in the arms of extremist group Boko Haram, Nigeria came under scrutiny from the US over alleged persecution of Christians. The Nigerian government pushed back on the claims, describing them as a gross misrepresentation of reality.
They're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria. And they have other countries very bad also. You know that part of the world very bad. They're killing the Christians and killing them in very low numbers. We're not going to allow that to happen.
2 weeks after rejecting claims of extremism, a Catholic school in the northern part of the country saw over 300 students and staff abducted by an armed group last week. Wandi Ntengento, Arabiya English.
For more on this, I'm joined by international journalist Mayowa Adegoke. Mayowa, thank you so much for joining me this evening to speak to me about this very story that's been happening. And I want to just go back to the events that happened last week. More than 300 children and staff were abducted from St. Mary's Catholic Church in Nigeria. Reports suggest about 50 of those who were held captive have managed to escape. What is the latest on the story, and do we have any updates on those children?
Thank you very much for having me. It is unfortunate what is happening in Nigeria right now. You're seeing insecurity surge across a particular region, and it's quite unfortunate. As of now, the government is doing everything it can to rescue the children, not just from the St. Mary's Catholic School, but you've got other people who have been abducted in other states as well. Unfortunately, latest news that we've got today is 11 people have been abducted from Kwara State. You may remember that Kwara State is where you had a church, people in a church abducted, and they've been rescued. But now you've got fresh set of 11 people who've been taken as well. Many of them women and children. It's quite unfortunate. The government is telling us that they're doing everything that they can to bring them back. You have the president who's ordered 30,000 extra policemen to be recruited. You've got a withdrawal of policemen from VIP services so that they can have more people in local communities policing. You've also got so many updates coming up from the government side saying they're doing everything that they can to address the situation, but ultimately people just want their family and friends, and of course people of the nation want all these people who have been taken returned home.
And it's really interesting. We're hearing from you now, and you just told me 11 people today again. You know, as we said, over 300 students and staff abducted. This is a very scary time, Mayowa, especially for Nigeria. But who is carrying out these kidnappings? Who's behind it? And I think the big question many people will be watching or thinking, why is this happening?
Of course, there are two groups that you can sort of credit all of this to. You've got religious terrorists, and you've got the group, say, call them armed bandits. Sometimes you hear the words Fulani herdsmen bandied around. So these two groups really have been credited with all of these kidnappings. And I'll have you know that this is not a recent thing. For many months and across years, kidnappings of this nature have been happening in Nigeria, although now it seems like there's a lot of attention, a lot of pressure talking about the numbers. Recall in 2014, you remember how the Chibok girls were also abducted in such large numbers, and that brought in this international attention. That is what we're seeing again. But obviously, with, say, insecurity and economic conditions, you have a lot of people getting taken and ransom being demanded for their return. So this is what we're seeing, and it's quite unfortunate. But these two sort of groups are the ones to be held responsible: religious terrorists as well as armed bandits.
And I do remember that story 11 years ago, covering it myself. Over 270 schoolgirls from Chibok were kidnapped, and that was by Boko Haram. And when we look at these stories and we hear Donald Trump saying Christians are being persecuted in Nigeria, do you agree with him on that sentiment, that this is happening?
Well, as a journalist, I'd say that I would sort of keep my personal take out of it. I'm a Christian myself, so as of course, I'd rather not speak to that. I'd rather tell you what the Nigerian government is saying. Of course, they've said this is not a Christian versus Muslim situation. And if you refer to the recent kidnappings, I think it's the Kebbi schoolgirls, most of them are Muslim. So you see that definitely two groups are affected, whether you're Christian or Muslim. However, what are the sentiments in the sort of Christian community? We've seen Christian leaders come out to agree with President Donald Trump to say, listen, you're not hearing stories of people being taken and being asked to convert their religion. That's in the case where you've got religious terrorists kidnapping in that situation. On the other side, it's just for ransom most of the time. So if you look at numbers as well, what do the numbers say? Do you have more Christians being abducted than Muslims? Ultimately, there's something that president supporters say. They say whether they're Muslim or Christian, they're all Nigerians. And I think I agree with that. I choose to agree with that, to say whether they're Christian or Muslim, we want these people back and we want these kidnappings to stop. And I think that's where I'd say is my personal take.
Also, just a quick question to you. Donald Trump has been talking about the situation in Nigeria. Do you think that his rhetoric is flaring up tensions in Nigeria itself? And we've also heard from the likes of Nicki Minaj, who's, of course, a famous celebrity. And I was just wondering what the feeling in Nigeria is. Is there concern that this is getting so much international attention?
So I would say that, as weird as it may sound, Donald Trump speaking about this and America's interest in it has a certain level of positive to it. And why do I say positive? Because now there's international pressure. And if the United States is taking particular concern in this, definitely it's calling on the government to sit up. Matter of fact, if you go on social media, you see a lot of Nigerians saying, listen, Donald Trump, we want you to come because we're tired of this and we want it to stop. So has it put extra pressure on the government as well as the security forces to sit tight and get it together? Yes. And I think ultimately that's a positive, where they're now being held accountable by, say, Big Brother Donald Trump. So I think that's a positive of it. Some people are concerned to say, listen, we don't want America sort of coming into the country, taking their own actions. We would rather have them collaborating, which is what the Nigerian government is doing, saying, listen, we want you to work with us and we're happy to work with you. We want it to end as well. But personally, I would say that it is a positive that the interest from America is putting pressure on the Nigerian government, because as I said before, these are not new. Kidnappings are not new. Kidnapping for ransom is not new. It's been going on for many years. And the big question is, when will all this stop?
Mayowa, maybe Big Brother Donald Trump may be able to help it. Thank you so much for joining me. Very, very interesting conversation.